I'm Elara Vance, and at 30, I've built a quiet empire in the luxury hotel industry. 12 properties across the country, all thriving, but none of that ever mattered to my family. To them, I've always been the disappointment, the failure, the one who couldn't live up to the Vance name. So when they booked their extravagant family reunion at San Francisco's most exclusive hotel, completely unaware it belonged to me, I stayed silent until the night of the gala when they humiliated me one last time. And I finally stepped out of the shadows. What I told them, it changed everything. Before I share how that night unfolded, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever been underestimated or overlooked by the people who should have believed in you most, hit like and subscribe, because this is your story too. Growing up a Vance meant one thing: excellence wasn't just encouraged, it was the air we breathed. My father, Dr. Elara Vance, was a renowned heart surgeon. He'd built his practice from the ground up, famous for delicate procedures that saved lives. My mother, Victoria, balanced her role as a high-powered VP at a major tech firm with maintaining our picture-perfect image in Los Angeles' elite social circles. From the outside, we were the epitome of the American dream: brilliant, successful, and impeccably polished. Every Vance child had their future meticulously mapped out by the time they were 10. My oldest brother, Robert, became an investment fund manager, managing billions for the wealthiest families. My sister, Clara, graduated top of her class from Stanford Law and swiftly rose to become a formidable federal prosecutor, tackling complex white-collar crimes. My younger brother, Daniel, ventured into the burgeoning AI industry, making his first million before turning 25. And then, there was me, Eleanor, the family disappointment. It wasn't always like that. I was a bright kid, always curious, always drawn to beauty and connection, but my creative instincts just didn't fit into the Vance's narrow, rigid definition of success. While Robert, Clara, and Daniel competed for the highest grades, the most prestigious internships, and the longest list of extracurriculars, I found my joy in creating experiences. I'd transform our backyard into elaborate, themed worlds for neighborhood kids' parties. I organized school events, obsessing over every tiny detail that would make guests feel truly special, truly seen. I could walk into any space, any room, and instantly see how to improve it. How to make it more welcoming, more memorable. Glorified party planning, my father would call it, a dismissive wave of his hand. A hobby, not a career, my mother would chime in, her voice laced with polite disdain at family dinners. While my siblings' academic awards and professional milestones were celebrated with champagne toasts and lavish gifts, my creative projects, no matter how successful or intricate, received tight, forced smiles and immediate subject changes. The conversation would quickly pivot back to Robert's latest acquisition, Clara's groundbreaking case, or Daniel's soaring tech valuation. Our extended family was cut from the same cloth. The Vance family reunion, an event that happened every 5 years, was hosted by my Aunt Bethany, my father's older sister and the self-appointed family matriarch ever since my grandparents passed. She had married into old San Francisco money, the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted, and she never let anyone forget her elevated status. These gatherings weren't about genuine connection or shared love. They were an unspoken Olympics of achievement. Every conversation morphed into a subtle competition, a chance to outshine, to impress, to reinforce the hierarchy. Robert's firm just closed its largest deal to date, record-breaking numbers. Clara just argued before the Ninth Circuit, a truly brilliant performance. Daniel's startup is on track for a Series B funding round next quarter, valuation through the roof. And then, inevitably, came that awkward, uncomfortable moment when someone would turn to me, their smile just a little too tight, their eyes just a little too curious. "And what about you, Eleanor? Still figuring things out?" Aunt Bethany was the absolute worst. She'd married Uncle Julian when she was 22, a calculated strategic move that solidified her position in San Francisco's high society. She never had a career herself, but she judged everyone else's mercilessly, especially mine. I remember my high school graduation party, a garden affair at our sprawling home. While other relatives offered generic congratulations, Aunt Bethany cornered me, a crystal flute of sparkling wine in her perfectly manicured hand. "Hospitality management," she'd purred, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's glorified housekeeping, darling. Vances don't serve people. We employ people who serve." I felt my cheeks burn, a deep, mortifying flush, as cousins nearby pretended not to listen but clearly were. My cousin Chloe, Aunt Bethany's daughter, gave me a fleeting look of pity before turning back to her friends. Chloe was attending USC pre-med at the time, firmly following the approved Vance path. Success in our family was measured by a simple, unyielding formula: prestigious degrees, plus high-earning careers, then separate impeccable social status, is $6 worth. There was no room for deviation, no allowance for alternative paths, no empathy for a different kind of ambition. My parents had invested everything: the best private schools, elite tutors, leveraging their extensive connections, to pave golden roads for their children. The unspoken expectation was that we would follow those roads without question, without hesitation. So when I announced my decision to attend UCLA's hospitality management program, instead of pursuing pre-med or pre-law, the family reaction was as if I'd declared I was joining a cult. My father's disappointment manifested as cold, simmering anger. My mother's came in the form of tearful manipulation, quiet whispers about how I was throwing away my potential. My siblings watched with a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment, as if my choice somehow reflected poorly on them. "The hotel industry is beneath your potential, Eleanor," my father had stated flatly during our final, heated argument before I left for college. "You'll be taking orders from people like us, not giving them." What they never understood, what they simply couldn't grasp, was that I didn't see hospitality as servitude. I saw it as creating magic, as orchestrating moments people would remember for a lifetime. I wasn't rejecting success. I was redefining it entirely, on my own terms. Before leaving for UCLA, I stumbled upon a quote by Maya Angelou that resonated so deeply it felt like it was written just for me. "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel." I wrote it on a small worn card and kept it tucked into my wallet. Through every family gathering where I felt small, through every dismissive comment about my choices, it became my secret mantra. When doubt crept in, when loneliness threatened to overwhelm me, I'd touch that card, and a quiet resolve would settle in my heart. The weekend I left for college, Aunt Bethany hosted a dinner to celebrate Robert receiving his first major investment banking bonus. As everyone raised their glasses to toast his achievement, Aunt Bethany looked directly at me, a glint in her eye, and said, "To pursuing excellence rather than ease." The message was clear, unmistakable. I had chosen the easy path, the path of least resistance, the path of failure. Little did they know, I was about to embark on the hardest journey of my life, one that would test every ounce of my resolve, every fiber of my being, and ultimately lead me to a success they couldn't even imagine. UCLA's hospitality program quickly dispelled any notion that I had chosen an easy path. The curriculum was rigorous, combining intensive business fundamentals with highly specialized hospitality knowledge and demanding practical experience. While many of my classmates called home for extra money, for emotional support, for advice, I suffered in silence. I had made a promise to myself. I would succeed or fail entirely on my own terms. No crawling back, no giving them the satisfaction of proving their predictions right. 3 months into my freshman year, my parents made their ultimatum chillingly clear during a tense, tear-filled phone call. "Either transfer to pre-law by next semester, Eleanor, or we're cutting you off financially," my father stated flatly, his voice devoid of warmth. My mother's voice trembled in the background, a theatrical whisper. "Please, darling, we only want what's best for you." The decision should have been impossible for a 19-year-old with no savings, no safety net. Yet somehow, it was the easiest choice I'd ever made. "Then cut me off," I replied, surprised by the unwavering steadiness in my voice. "I'll find a way." And find a way I did. Though the path was brutal, unforgiving, I took a job working the front desk at a tired local hotel from 11:00 p.m. to 7:00 a.m., pulling all-nighters, sleeping in short, desperate bursts between classes. On weekends, I picked up catering shifts at campus events, serving people who looked exactly like my family, people who would never notice me beyond my uniform. During semester breaks, when dorms closed, I house-sat for professors, staying in strangers' homes to save on rent, often feeling like a ghost. My grades suffered initially as I battled exhaustion, balancing work and school, but I was learning something far more valuable than perfect scores: resilience, gritty, hard-won resilience. By junior year, I was managing the front office at the university's own student-run hotel, the Luskin Conference Center and Hotel, while maintaining a 3.7 GPA. I lived on instant noodles and lukewarm coffee, worked through holidays, and sent my siblings generic birthday cards I could barely afford. The rare times I checked social media, I saw my family vacationing in the Maldives, celebrating milestones at Michelin-starred restaurants, their lives a glossy, untouchable tableau of perfection. I shut down my accounts after that. It was too painful, too stark a reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. My first post-graduation job was as an assistant manager at a mid-range chain hotel in Scottsdale, Arizona. The property was perpetually understaffed. The absentee owner was cutting corners on maintenance, and the guests were often difficult, entitled. My tiny apartment had a persistent desert dust problem, and my secondhand car broke down weekly. This was not the glamorous hotel career my family had mockingly predicted. One sweltering Arizona night, after handling a particularly aggressive guest who was furious about a double booking, I sat in the cramped, windowless back office and simply cried. I was exhausted, broke, and questioning everything. That's when I met David Chen. He was the regional director, conducting a surprise inspection. Instead of reprimanding me for my emotional state, he sat down, listened patiently, and offered me a tissue. "You have something rare, Eleanor," he told me after I'd composed myself. "You're thinking about the guest experience, truly caring, even when you're at your breaking point. That can't be taught." David became the mentor I desperately needed. He saw potential where my family had seen only disappointment. Under his guidance, I moved to Las Vegas to help turn around a struggling boutique hotel off the Strip. I worked 16-hour days, redesigning the guest experience from check-in to check-out, focusing on personalized service. 6 months later, occupancy rates had increased by 40%, and I received my first significant bonus. I called my mother to share the news, hoping for even a small acknowledgement of my progress, a flicker of pride. "That's nice, dear," she said distractedly. "Did you hear Clara is being considered for a Supreme Court clerkship? The formal announcement will be next spring. You'll need to find something appropriate to wear for the celebration." The conversation quickly, inevitably, turned to my sister's achievements, with no further interest in mine. By the time I hung up, the small victory I'd felt earlier had completely evaporated. I never cashed that bonus check. Instead, I framed it, a stark, silent reminder that my achievements were valid, real, even without my family's approval. As I approached my late 20s, communication with my family became increasingly strained. Holiday visits were exercises in forced politeness, each interaction layered with unspoken judgments, subtle digs. At one Thanksgiving dinner, my brother Daniel, already a millionaire from his tech ventures, asked what I made annually. Then, barely disguising his snicker, he remarked, "That's what my assistant makes." He said it as he carved into his perfectly roasted turkey, completely oblivious to the knife twisting in my gut. I stopped attending family holidays after that. The emotional cost was simply too high. When I turned 30, I made a pivotal decision: to leave Las Vegas and move to San Francisco, where the hospitality industry was booming and the potential for innovation was boundless. I also ended a 2-year relationship with Mark, a venture capitalist who, despite his initial support, had slowly begun to echo my family's values. "You're too smart to be doing what you're doing," he'd said during our final argument. "You could be running a major corporation by now instead of babysitting hotel guests." The breakup was painful, not because I loved him deeply, but because it reinforced that I was choosing a path of profound solitude. My family didn't understand me. My boyfriend didn't understand me. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wondered if there was something fundamentally wrong with me for not wanting what others seemed to value so easily. San Francisco brought new challenges, but also a profound sense of freedom. I was truly on my own in a city where no one knew me as the Vance disappointment. I took a position as operations director at a hip, new hotel concept targeting millennial travelers. The pay was still modest, but I was learning the business from the inside out, understanding everything from front desk protocols to inventory management to cutting-edge marketing strategies. The loneliness of building a life without family support was sometimes overwhelming. I'd walk through the hotel lobby during the holidays, watching joyful reunions between guests and their loved ones, feeling the aching absence of anyone who truly cared about my journey. I made friends among colleagues, but I kept them at a distance, afraid to let anyone too close after years of relentless rejection. What my family never saw, what they never understood during those long, difficult years of struggle, was how deeply I was learning the hospitality industry. Every setback taught me something valuable. Every difficult guest helped me refine my approach to service, to truly understand human nature. Every tight budget forced me to innovate, to find creative solutions. I wasn't just surviving, I was meticulously laying the groundwork for something they couldn't even imagine. San Francisco changed everything. 6 months into my role at that trendy boutique hotel, I met Maria Rodriguez during a hospitality industry mixer. Maria had made her fortune in tech, a brilliant software engineer turned entrepreneur, and she was looking to diversify her investments. She was sharp, direct, and unlike most wealthy people I'd encountered, she actually listened when I spoke about my vision for revolutionizing luxury hospitality. Everyone focuses on amenities, I explained, as we shared an overpriced bottle of California Cabernet. Higher thread counts, bigger televisions, fancier toiletries. But true luxury isn't about stuff. It's about making guests feel seen, anticipated, and truly valued. It's about creating an atmosphere of genuine care. 3 hours and 2 bottles later, Maria slid her business card across the table. I want to hear more, Eleanor. Let's meet next week with my financial team. I assumed nothing would come of it. Wealthy people often made empty promises, tossed out vague ideas. But Maria wasn't like that. She showed up with her team, listened intently to my detailed presentation, asked tough, incisive questions, and then did the unthinkable. She offered to be the primary investor in my own boutique hotel concept. Your family must be thrilled, she said, a warm smile on her face, as we signed the initial partnership agreement. I forced a tight smile. They don't exactly know yet. Maria raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She understood ambition and privacy better than most. With Maria's unwavering backing, Elara Hospitality Group was born. Though I kept my involvement quiet, we purchased a dilapidated but architecturally stunning Art Deco building in an up-and-coming San Francisco neighborhood. I lived in a small apartment within the construction zone for 18 grueling months, overseeing every single detail of the renovation. I wanted to create something that would redefine luxury as authenticity and profound attention, rather than mere ostentation or flashy excess. The Elara Collection's flagship property, the Grand Pacific Hotel, opened to little fanfare in the mainstream press. No celebrity-studded grand opening, but it quickly became a whispered recommendation among celebrities, tech moguls, and business elite who valued privacy, personalized service, and discretion above all else. I implemented cutting-edge systems to track guest preferences in ways that felt magical rather than intrusive. A guest who once mentioned loving a specific vintage wine might find that exact bottle waiting for them in their room during their next stay. A business traveler who always requested a specific kind of pillow would find them already in the room, perfectly fluffed, without asking. During those early, demanding years, I worked 80-hour weeks, fueled by coffee and an unyielding drive, while my family continued to believe I was drifting aimlessly, still figuring things out. My mother's occasional calls always included some version of, "It's not too late to go to law school, dear." I deflected their questions about my career with vague responses about working in hospitality management, which they took as absolute confirmation of my failure. In reality, the Grand Pacific's success exceeded all projections. Within 2 years, we were operating at 95% occupancy, with a waitlist for peak periods stretching for months. Maria and I began looking for our next opportunity, this time with a larger group of investors who had taken notice of our remarkable profitability. We strategically acquired a struggling historic hotel in downtown Los Angeles, then one in New York City, followed by properties in Seattle and Miami. I made a conscious decision to operate behind the scenes. No press interviews, no public profile, no industry awards. The hotels ran under the Elara Hospitality Group banner, but few people knew who Vance really was. I wanted the work to speak for itself. And perhaps in some small, unacknowledged corner of my heart, I wanted to reveal my success to my family, only when it was so massive, so undeniable, that it couldn't possibly be dismissed. My siblings occasionally sent condescending text messages or holiday cards with family photos showcasing their perfect lives. Robert with his trophy wife and 3 future Ivy League children, Clara arguing cases before the Supreme Court, Daniel closing billion-dollar deals, I kept these reminders of my exclusion, their casual cruelty, in a small lacquered box on my desk, using them as fuel when doubt inevitably crept in. 7 years after opening our first property, Aura Hospitality Group had 12 luxury hotels across the country, each unique in design and character, but all united by our core philosophy of anticipatory service and authentic luxury. Industry insiders knew about our remarkable profitability and employee retention rates, but I remained virtually unknown to the public. Until the Grand Pacific, the opportunity to acquire San Francisco's most storied hotel property came unexpectedly. The century-old institution, a true landmark, had fallen into disrepair under corporate ownership that prioritized cost-cutting over guest experience. When it came on the market, I knew it had to be mine, not just as a shrewd business opportunity, but as a profound statement. The Grand Pacific stood just 3 blocks from my parents' sprawling mansion in Bel Air. It was where my family had hosted countless celebration dinners, where Aunt Bethany held her annual charity galas, where Los Angeles' elite gathered to see and be seen. My father had once pointed to it as we walked past and said, "That's what real success looks like, Eleanor, building something that lasts." I poured everything into the Grand Pacific's restoration. The 2-year, $100 million renovation respected the property's rich history, while seamlessly bringing it into the modern era. I personally selected every fabric, tested every mattress, tasted every menu item, and meticulously trained the staff in our signature service style. I kept my identity as the owner private from nearly everyone, working through shell companies and trusted advisors. Only the general manager and head of security knew who I truly was. The Grand Pacific reopened to spectacular reviews. A masterclass in understated luxury, wrote Travel and Leisure. The new standard in hospitality excellence, declared Forbes. Celebrities, politicians, and business icons clamored for reservations. The waiting list for a stay stretched to months, and still, my family had no idea. They continued to view the Grand Pacific as a symbol of the success I would never achieve, unaware that they were standing in the very house I built. The irony might have remained private, my secret satisfaction, if not for the upcoming Vance family reunion. After 12 years of building my empire in silence, everything was about to change. I first learned about the upcoming family reunion through Instagram. My cousin Chloe's teenage daughter had tagged family members in a post. "Can't wait for the big Vance reunion at the Grand Pacific. #FamilyLegacy, #SVibes." I stared at my phone, a cold knot of ice forming in my stomach. The Grand Pacific, my Grand Pacific. For a brief, hopeful moment, I wondered if this was their way of acknowledging my success. Had they somehow discovered my connection to the hotel? Was this an olive branch? A way to finally welcome me back into the fold, now that I had proven myself by their standards? I should have known better. The official invitation arrived a week later via email, not addressed to me, but to all Vance family members on a group thread. Aunt Bethany's message was effusive about the exclusive buyout of the Grand Pacific's event spaces, and how only the best would do for the Vances. She detailed the weekend's activities, the dress code, formal of course, and the expectation that everyone would share their latest achievements during Saturday's gala dinner. I was about to respond to simply decline with a polite excuse, when a separate text message from Aunt Bethany popped up on my phone. "Eleanor, dear, I'm sending this privately to spare you public embarrassment. The reunion is meant to celebrate Vance family success and legacy. Given your continued alternative lifestyle choices, we think it best you sit this one out. No failures allowed is our little theme this year. I'm sure you understand. Perhaps next time, if things have improved for you." My hand shook as I read and reread the message. 12 years of relentless hard work, reduced to failure in an instant. The familiar, suffocating knot of inadequacy tightened in my chest, the one I thought I'd finally outgrown. I set my phone down and walked to the window of my penthouse office, overlooking San Francisco's iconic skyline, properties I owned glittering in the distance. Before I could collect my thoughts, my phone buzzed again with activity from the family group chat. Someone had asked about my attendance. "Eleanor won't be joining us," my mother wrote. "She's still figuring things out." My brother Daniel chimed in. "Too bad. The Grand Pacific is probably looking for staff, though. Maybe she could serve us drinks." Several laughing emojis followed from cousins, and my sister Clara added, "Be nice. But yes, maybe Eleanor could give us the insider tour of the service elevators and laundry facilities, since that's her area of expertise. I watched the conversation unfold in real time, each message a fresh cut, a new bruise. They didn't just think I was a failure, they found amusement in it. 12 years of complete independence, of building something extraordinary, and they still saw me as nothing more than a punchline. My assistant Sarah knocked and entered my office with my afternoon schedule. She immediately noticed my expression. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed her my phone silently. Her eyes widened as she read. "These people are your family? The ones whose pictures you keep in that box." Her indignation on my behalf was touching, fierce. "And they don't know about any of this?" She gestured around my office, toward the empire I'd built. "They never asked," I said simply. "They decided who I was a long time ago." Sarah handed back my phone. "So what are you going to do?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. What would I do? I could ignore the reunion entirely, continuing my policy of privacy and distance. I could send a message revealing my success, throwing it in their faces from a safe distance. Or, "They've booked the entire main floor of the Grand Pacific," I said slowly, an idea, cold and brilliant, forming in my mind. 60 rooms for out-of-town family, the grand ballroom for Saturday's gala. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "The executive team sent the contract over for your approval last week." I didn't make the connection to your family name. I walked to my desk and pulled up the reservation details. There it was, the Vance Family Reunion, hosted by Bethany and Julian Vance, a complete buyout of the hotel's premier spaces, a custom menu with premium wine pairings, special requests for welcome amenities, turn-down service, and Sunday brunch, the kind of event the Grand Pacific excelled at, where no detail was overlooked and no expense spared for the comfort of our guests. In that moment, something crystallized within me. They had unknowingly chosen my domain for their celebration of success, while explicitly excluding me for not being successful enough. The universe had handed me the perfect stage for a reckoning. "I'm going to attend," I said finally, not as a Vance, as the owner. Over the next week, I worked closely with Marcus Green, my head of security at the Grand Pacific, and Isabella Ruiz, the general manager, to prepare. We reviewed the guest list, room assignments, and event details with meticulous care. I wanted everything to be flawless, not a single detail that could be criticized. The Vances would receive the best service the Grand Pacific had to offer. "Do you want us to tell the staff who you are in relation to these guests?" Isabella asked during our planning session. "No," I decided. "Just that I'm the owner, making a rare appearance to ensure our VIP guests are well taken care of. Business as usual." Late at night, alone in my San Francisco penthouse, I battled conflicting emotions. Part of me fantasized about grand dramatic revelations, having the family escorted out by security, or making a spectacular entrance at the gala with a blistering speech about their years of emotional abuse, their calculated dismissals. The revenge scenarios played out in vivid technicolor detail as I tried to sleep. But another part of me, the part that had built Aura Hospitality on principles of dignity, authentic human connection, and genuine care, recoiled at these fantasies. What would it say about me if I used my success merely as a weapon? Wasn't that exactly the kind of behavior I'd rejected in my family? The very definition of their smallness? Maria called the night before I was due to fly to San Francisco. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" she asked. Her voice calm and steady after I explained the situation. "You've spent years keeping your personal and professional lives separate. This could be messy." "I'm not sure of anything, Maria," I admitted, looking out at the city lights. "But I'm tired of living in separate pieces. Either this breaks things completely or it begins some kind of healing. Either way, I'll be whole at the end of it." As my private jet approached San Francisco the next day, I looked out the window at the city where I'd grown up feeling perpetually inadequate. Somewhere down there, my family was arriving at the Grand Pacific, unaware that they were walking into my house, by my rules. The text from Aunt Bethany still burned in my memory. No failures allowed. I was about to show them what failure really looked like. The Grand Pacific security office was not designed for comfort. 6 large screens displayed various areas of the hotel, from the sprawling, elegant lobby with its sweeping marble staircase, to the serene garden terrace, to the vibrant restaurant and bar areas. Marcus Green, my head of security, a calm, unflappable presence, sat beside me as we watched the Vance family begin to arrive on Friday afternoon. "That's my father," I said, pointing to a distinguished, gray-haired man checking in at the front desk. My mother, elegant and perfectly coiffed, stood beside him in a designer suit. Marcus nodded, making a note. We had compiled a digital dossier of key family members so the staff could recognize them and ensure their preferences were met without a hitch. "And that's Aunt Bethany with my Uncle Julian," I added, as a woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair strode imperiously through the doors, flanked by uniformed staff carrying her array of designer luggage. Even through the security monitor, her imperious bearing was unmistakable. I watched as she approached the front desk, bypassing the small line of other guests. Even with the sound muted, I could read her body language, entitlement personified. "Let's listen in," Marcus suggested, activating the audio feed. "We reserved the ambassador suite," Aunt Bethany was saying, her voice carrying that distinctive, upper-class San Francisco accent. "But I've heard the Nob Hill suite has a better view of the bay. We'll take that instead." Isabella Ruiz, the general manager, maintained her impeccable professional composure, a slight, knowing smile playing on her lips. "I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Vance, but the Nob Hill suite is already occupied. The ambassador suite is our most presidential accommodation, and we've prepared it specially for you with all the amenities you requested." "Do you know who we are?" Aunt Bethany drew herself up to her full height, which wasn't particularly tall, but radiated an aura of immense importance. "The Vances are one of San Francisco's founding families. Surely whoever is in the Nob Hill suite can be moved." I felt a familiar twist of embarrassment watching her behavior. This was how my family operated in the world, expecting it to bend to their will. I'd seen this scene play out countless times growing up, at restaurants, in boutiques, at exclusive clubs, always shrinking inside as waitstaff or store clerks were treated as obstacles rather than people. "I cannot disclose information about other guests, Mrs. Vance, but I assure you, the ambassador suite will exceed your expectations," Isabella replied smoothly, her voice a soothing balm. "And the owner has arranged for a special welcome amenity for your entire party." At the mention of the owner, Aunt Bethany's demeanor shifted subtly. Her imperiousness lessened, replaced by a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a hint of respect. "The owner? You've spoken with them personally about our stay?" "Yes, Mrs. Vance. The owner takes a special interest in all our significant events, especially those of such prominent families." This seemed to placate her somewhat. Being singled out by the elusive owner aligned perfectly with her inflated sense of importance. "Well, I suppose that's appropriate," Aunt Bethany conceded, a slight tilt of her chin. "The ambassador will have to do then." As Isabella escorted them gracefully to the elevators, I exhaled slowly, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. "Your staff handles difficult guests remarkably well," Marcus smiled, a glint in his eye. "They've been trained by the best," I supplied, a small private joke between us. Throughout the afternoon, I watched more family members arrive. My brothers and sister with their spouses and children, cousins I hadn't seen in years, family friends who were practically relatives. All were greeted with the impeccable, anticipatory service the Grand Pacific was known for, all oblivious to the fact that the failure they'd excluded was monitoring their every reaction, anticipating their every need. I noticed patterns quickly. My father tipped generously, but never made eye contact with staff, as if they were invisible. My sister Clara was glued to her phone, barely acknowledging the people serving her. My brother Daniel loudly name-dropped clients and business associates in the lobby, ensuring everyone knew his importance, his latest triumphs. The most revealing moments came when they thought no one important was watching. My cousin Chloe complaining loudly about the temperature of her welcome champagne. Aunt Bethany's daughter Stephanie making a snide remark about a bellhop's uniform. Uncle Julian sending back his old-fashioned cocktail 3 times until the bartender got it acceptable. "Your family is..." Marcus paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Challenging," I supplied, a wry smile on my face. "I know." By evening, most of the family had gathered in the Grand Pacific's renowned restaurant, The Summit, for dinner. I moved from the security office to a private dining room adjacent to the main restaurant, where I could observe without being seen, through a partially open door. I listened to the conversations, to the laughter and the stories being shared among people who had categorically rejected me, dismissed me, written me off. Did you hear about Eleanor? My cousin Chloe's voice carried clearly to where I sat, the sound a sharp stab. Aunt Victoria says she's living in some tiny apartment in San Francisco, still working at a hotel chain. Such a waste of potential. I know, someone replied. The Vances paid for the best education money could buy, and she just throws it away to become a glorified maid. At least she's not here making everyone uncomfortable with her life choices, Aunt Bethany chimed in, her voice crisp and definitive. This weekend is about celebrating real achievement, people who belong. I felt my cheeks burn, but not with shame this time. With a quiet, burning resolve, I signaled to the server who had been briefed on my presence. Please ensure my family wants for nothing tonight, I instructed quietly. Every whim, every preference, no matter how difficult. The Vance standard of excellence. Yes, Miss Vance, he nodded, his eyes respectful, and slipped back into the main dining room. I didn't make my presence known that first night. Instead, I watched, I listened, I remembered, and with each dismissive comment about my absence, each mocking word about my career path, I grew more certain that I was doing the right thing. Later that evening, as I took a rare moment to walk through the hotel lobby, checking details that only an owner would notice, a crooked painting, a slightly dim light fixture, I nearly collided with my cousin Chloe coming from the bar. Excuse me, she said automatically, then looked at me more carefully. Do I know you? You look so familiar. 10 years had passed since she'd seen me. My appearance had changed significantly. The uncomfortable, insecure girl in ill-fitting clothes was gone, replaced by a woman in a tailored designer suit, with confident posture and a different, more sophisticated hairstyle. I don't believe we've met, I replied smoothly. Are you enjoying your stay at the Grand Pacific? Yes, it's magnificent, she exclaimed, her eyes bright. My family has a long history with this hotel. We're having a big reunion this weekend. She waved her hand vaguely, as if the entire building was a part of her lineage. How wonderful, I smiled. Family is so important. It is, she laughed, a little too loudly, then caught herself. Well, when they're worth claiming, you know. Just family drama, you know how it is. Oh, I certainly do, I said, my smile never wavering. Enjoy your evening, Miss Vance. I walked away before she could process that I'd used her last name without her mentioning it. By the time I returned to my suite, I had text messages from both Isabella and Marcus reporting that the family dinner had gone exceptionally well. Despite numerous special requests and several complaints about minute details, the Vance family had retired to their rooms pleased with their treatment, completely unaware that every pillow fluffed, every drink mixed, every door held open was done under my direct instruction. Saturday morning brought the first major event, a lavish breakfast in the Azure Garden Terrace overlooking the bay, followed by family photographs on the grand staircase. I watched from my suite through binoculars as they assembled in their color-coordinated outfits, the perfect picture of success and unity. To the Vance legacy, my father toasted, raising his mimosa, 3 generations of excellence. Everyone clinked glasses and cheered. They looked like something from a glossy magazine spread about America's elite families. Not a hair out of place, not a single visible crack in the facade. The grand revelation was coming soon. As I prepared for the evening gala, selecting a gown that made me feel both powerful and authentically myself, I wondered what would happen when they finally saw me. When they realized whose name was really on this building, would there be apologies, denials? Would they try to claim they'd known all along, that they'd been secretly proud? Would they attempt to take credit for my success, saying their tough love had motivated me? Or would there be genuine shock, and perhaps a true reckoning? Whatever happened, I was ready. 12 years of being the family failure had prepared me for this moment. The girl they had rejected had built an empire while they weren't looking, and tonight they would finally see me. Saturday evening arrived with a flurry of activity throughout the Grand Pacific. The grand ballroom had been transformed for the Vance family gala, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm golden glow over tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their melodies weaving through the air. Staff in immaculate uniforms circulated with champagne and exquisite canapes. I stood in my office, adjacent to the ballroom, watching the family gather through a one-way glass panel. They were resplendent in evening wear, the women in designer gowns, the men in tailored tuxedos. From a distance, they looked perfect. Exactly the image the Vance family had always projected to the world. Isabella knocked and entered, looking elegant and composed in her general manager's attire. "Everything is proceeding according to plan, Miss Vance. The family seems very pleased with the arrangements." "And the special instructions?" I asked. "All in place. The staff has been briefed. They still don't know you're related to the guests, but they understand this evening is particularly important to you." I nodded, smoothing down my midnight blue gown. I'd chosen it carefully, sophisticated but not showy, expensive but not ostentatious. I wanted to look like myself, not a costume of what my family considered success. "I'm going to circulate for a while before making myself known," I decided. "I want to take the temperature of the room." With a deep breath, I entered the ballroom from a side door, becoming just another elegantly dressed guest among many. The advantage of being estranged from one's family for over a decade is that many members wouldn't recognize you. I moved through the crowd, picking up snippets of conversation, gauging the atmosphere. Robert just received another research grant, $3 million for his AI investment analysis. Daniel closed the Phoenix deal. The Wall Street Journal is calling it the acquisition of the year. Clara is being considered for a federal judgeship, the youngest in the circuit's history. The familiar litany of accomplishments washed over me. In the past, these conversations had made me feel small, inadequate, my stomach churning with self-doubt. Tonight they seemed almost quaint in their predictability. Near the bar, I overheard my mother speaking to a distant cousin. "The hotel has exceeded our expectations. Bethany was right to insist on the Grand Pacific. They say the owner is some reclusive billionaire who personally approves every detail." The cousin nodded. "I heard they turned away a major celebrity last month because she was rude to the staff at check-in. Can you imagine having that kind of power?" I smiled to myself, remembering the incident. The celebrity had been an entitled reality TV star who'd made a young desk clerk cry. I'd personally asked her to leave and had her bags sent to the Marriott down the street. As I turned away from the bar, I nearly collided with my mother. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the slight softening of her jawline despite what was clearly excellent cosmetic work. Her eyes flickered with momentary confusion. "Excuse me, do we know each other?" The years fell away, and suddenly I was that little girl again, desperate for her approval. My carefully scripted responses vanished, and I found myself speechless, my heart hammering in my chest. "You look so familiar," she continued, studying my face, her brow furrowed. "Are you related to the Sterling family from Malibu?" I shook my head, finding my voice. "No, I'm not. Are you enjoying your evening, Mrs. Vance?" "Very much, thank you. The Grand Pacific has outdone itself." "Are you at the hotel?" she inquired, her gaze still piercing. "In a manner of speaking," I replied carefully. "I take a special interest in events like this." Before she could inquire further, Aunt Bethany's voice rang out across the ballroom, calling everyone to be seated for dinner. My mother excused herself, still looking slightly perplexed, and moved toward the head table, leaving me momentarily shaken by the near recognition. I retreated to a quiet corner, watching as my family settled at their assigned tables, oblivious to my presence. Isabella caught my eye from across the room, raising an eyebrow in question. I nodded slightly, indicating we should proceed as planned. Dinner service began flawlessly. The custom menu featured dishes I'd personally selected to showcase the Grand Pacific's culinary excellence, with exquisite wine pairings for each course. From my vantage point, I could see the family enjoying the meal, complimenting the servers, fully immersed in their self-congratulatory celebration. Between the main course and dessert, Aunt Bethany rose, champagne flute in hand, to give her traditional family address. The room quieted, the soft music fading slightly as she began speaking. For 5 generations, the Vance name has stood for excellence in Los Angeles and San Francisco. We've produced doctors who save lives, lawyers who shape justice, business leaders who drive innovation. Tonight, we celebrate not just our accomplishments, but the values that made them possible: discipline, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to being the very best. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. "We may not be perfect," she continued with a self-deprecating laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But we Vances never settle for mediocrity. We never choose the easy path. We never embarrass the family name." My hands tightened around my water glass, my knuckles white. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, raising her glass higher, her eyes sweeping the room, to absent family members. To those who couldn't be with us tonight because they're serving our country, furthering their education abroad, or otherwise engaged in pursuits worthy of the Vance name. The deliberate omission was clear. A poisoned arrow aimed directly at me, for anyone who knew I hadn't been invited. A flush of hot anger warmed my cheeks as family members dutifully raised their glasses. Just then, the moment I'd waited for, the perfect opportunity presented itself. A small commotion erupted at Aunt Bethany's table as a server accidentally spilled a single drop of red wine on the pristine white tablecloth, perilously close to her designer handbag. "This is unacceptable," she exclaimed, her voice suddenly shrill, carrying across the now silent room. "Where is the manager? The service here has been barely adequate all evening. To think we paid a premium for exclusivity." Isabella approached the table immediately, the perfect picture of professional concern. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, Mrs. Vance. Please allow us to address the situation immediately." "Address it? The damage is done. This purse is Hermes, I'll have you know." Aunt Bethany's voice rose with indignation, her face contorted in a furious grimace. "Who's in charge here? I want to speak to whoever runs this establishment." The room was uncomfortably quiet now, other guests shifting awkwardly in their seats, heads turning. Isabella maintained her composure, her gaze calm and steady. "Of course, Mrs. Vance. As it happens, the owner is here tonight, and would be happy to address your concerns personally." Aunt Bethany looked momentarily mollified. Well, finally, some proper accountability. This was it, the moment, 12 years in the making. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped forward, out of the shadows, into the center of the room. All eyes turned to me, a sudden blinding spotlight. "Good evening, Aunt Bethany," I said, my voice clear and steady, betraying no hint of the storm raging inside me. "I understand there's an issue with your table. As the owner of the Grand Pacific, I want to ensure your complete satisfaction." The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. A silent gasp that collective took their breath away. Aunt Bethany's face went from imperious to confused, then to ashen in the span of seconds. My father half rose from his chair, his mouth open but no words emerging. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering silently onto the white tablecloth, the liquid spreading like a slow crimson stain. "Eleanor?" My sister Clara was the first to find her voice, disbelief evident in every syllable, every strained muscle in her face. "Hello, family," I said, addressing the room at large, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. "And welcome to the Grand Pacific, my hotel, one of 12 in the Elara Hospitality Group portfolio, which I founded and own outright." The silence that followed was deafening. Faces registered shock, confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror. "I understand there was some concern about wine on the tablecloth," I continued, my voice calm, approaching Aunt Bethany's table with measured steps. "We take every detail seriously here. It's what has earned us 5 stars and a reputation as the most exclusive hotel in San Francisco." I signaled to a nearby server, who immediately began blotting the nearly invisible wine spot with a precise, almost surgical technique I'd personally developed for such situations. "This isn't possible," Aunt Bethany finally sputtered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, completely drained of its earlier authority. "You're a hotel employee. You work at some chain in Arizona." "I own a rather significant property in Arizona, yes," I replied calmly, my eyes meeting hers, holding them, along with hotels in New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Miami, and several other cities. The Elara Hospitality Group employs over 2,000 people and generated $300 million in revenue last year. My brother Daniel's face had turned an interesting shade of purple, his usual confident smirk completely gone. "You're lying. This is some kind of stunt." Isabella stepped forward smoothly, a subtle smile of satisfaction playing on her lips, presenting a sleek portfolio with the Grand Pacific's ownership documents and recent press coverage of Elara Hospitality Group. "If I may," she said, her voice clear and authoritative, "these materials verify Miss Vance's position." My father took the portfolio with shaking hands, scanning the documents, his expression unreadable, a mixture of disbelief and something akin to awe. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked softly, tears forming in her eyes, her voice choked with emotion. The question hung in the air, laying bare the heart of the matter, the core of all our pain. Why didn't I tell them? The answer was in every dismissive comment, every comparison to my siblings, every rolled eye, every glorified housekeeping, every no failures allowed text message. You never asked, I said simply, my voice unwavering, my gaze sweeping across each of them. You decided who I was a long time ago, and that person wasn't worth your interest. I turned to address the entire family, my voice gaining strength, not in anger, but in quiet conviction. I didn't arrange this reveal to humiliate anyone. I didn't spend 12 years building this company to prove you wrong. My voice softened, tinged with a deep, enduring passion. I did it because I love creating spaces where people feel valued, where their experience truly matters, where excellence means something more than status or appearance. My gaze returned to Aunt Bethany, whose imperious bearing had completely collapsed, leaving her looking small and frail. The Vance name does stand for excellence, but excellence comes in many forms. Sometimes it looks like a life-saving surgical innovation. Sometimes it looks like a legal victory. And sometimes, Aunt Bethany, it looks like turning a wine spill into an opportunity for exceptional service rather than a public tantrum. The room remained silent, the weight of revelation hanging heavy in the air. I had imagined this moment for years, pictured their shock and regret, fantasized about vindicating words I might say. But now that it was happening, I felt no triumph, no vengeful satisfaction. Only a quiet certainty that I was finally, truly being seen for who I truly was. Please, everyone, enjoy your dessert, I said, gesturing to the servers who had been waiting discreetly. The Grand Pacific's signature chocolate soufflé is worth experiencing. This evening is still a celebration of family, after all. As I turned to leave, my father stood up, slowly, and crossed to where I stood. His face was a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. "Eleanor," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, hesitant. I don't know what to say. For the first time in my adult life, I looked my father directly in the eye without feeling smaller, without shrinking. "You don't need to say anything tonight, Dad," I said, my voice soft but firm. "We have time now, for new conversations, if you want them." And with that, I walked out of the ballroom, my head held high, the immense weight of a decade's silence finally lifted from my shoulders. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaos, contained only by the dignified, hushed setting of the Grand Pacific. Family members huddled in shocked, whispered conversations. Some stared openly as I moved through the hotel during the remainder of the weekend. Others avoided eye contact entirely, as if I were a ghost they feared. The carefully choreographed reunion activities continued, but with a palpable undercurrent of disbelief, of a fundamental shift that changed everything. Aunt Bethany retreated to her suite that night and remained there for most of Sunday, sending Uncle Julian to make her excuses about a sudden debilitating migraine. I instructed the staff to send up her favorite herbal tea with house-made shortbread cookies, not as mockery, but as a quiet demonstration of what true hospitality means, caring for people, even when they haven't earned it, even when they've tried to hurt you. The first real conversation came Sunday morning when my sister, Clara, knocked hesitantly on my office door. She entered slowly, looking around at the expansive, beautifully appointed space that so clearly belonged to someone in charge. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, perching awkwardly on the edge of a plush armchair, her usual poise noticeably absent. "Neither do I admitted, sitting across from her. "It's been a long time, Clara." Clara had always been the most driven of my siblings, the one who most embodied our parents' values of visible, unassailable achievement. Looking at her now, I saw the toll that relentless pursuit of perfection had taken. The fine lines of stress around her eyes, the tightness in her shoulders, the way she clutched her hands together. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "All those years, those family gatherings where we talked about our lives, our careers, and you never mentioned all this." She gestured vaguely around the opulent office. "Would you have believed me?" I asked gently, my voice even. "Or would you have thought I was exaggerating to save face, trying to compete?" Her silence was answer enough. She looked down at her hands. "The truth is, Clara, every time I achieved something, when we opened our first hotel, when we expanded to New York, when the industry awards started coming in, I thought about sharing it with you all. But each time I remembered all the dismissive comments, the eye rolls, the casual way my career choice was treated as a phase I needed to outgrow, as something beneath the Vance name. I didn't know, she said softly, finally looking up, her eyes filled with a raw vulnerability I'd never seen before. I mean, I knew we all gave you a hard time, but I didn't realize how much it hurt you, how deep it went. It's not just about hurt feelings, Clara, I explained, the words coming easily now. It's about respect, about seeing someone for who they are, rather than who you think they should be. It's about being worthy of curiosity, of interest, regardless of your chosen path. As we talked, something remarkable happened. For the first time in our adult lives, Clara spoke to me as an equal. She shared her own struggles with the family's expectations, confessing that her seemingly perfect life included a marriage that was falling apart under the immense pressure of 2 high-powered careers and 3 children she barely saw. I look at you now, she said, her voice tinged with a quiet awe, and I wonder if you got it right all along. You followed your passion instead of the prescribed path. You built something extraordinary entirely on your own terms, something real. By Sunday afternoon, Robert and Daniel had also sought me out separately. Each conversation was different, some more defensive than others, but all shared a common thread. My siblings had been living with their own profound doubts about the rigid, narrow Vance definition of success, even as they seemingly embodied it perfectly. Robert admitted to being burned out from his cutthroat investment fund. He questioned whether the immense prestige and even greater wealth were truly worth the crushing cost to his health and his crumbling family life. He talked about sleepless nights, constant anxiety, and a feeling that he was always chasing the next bigger deal, never quite catching up to his own expectations. Daniel confessed that his high-flying AI career, while financially staggering, left him feeling empty. He was chasing deal after deal, innovation after innovation, but with no real sense of purpose beyond accumulating more wealth and status. I make obscene amounts of money moving other people's money around, he said bluntly, his voice raw. You create spaces that make people happy. You build experiences that genuinely enrich lives. Who's really successful here, Eleanor? The most difficult conversation came late Sunday evening when my parents requested to meet privately in the Grand Pacific's serene garden terrace. I found them sitting side by side, looking smaller somehow, less imposing than the towering, infallible figures of my childhood. We owe you an apology, Eleanor, my father began, his voice raspy, the words clearly unfamiliar and difficult in his mouth. Many apologies, actually. My mother reached for my hand across the glass-topped table, her eyes red-rimmed. We were wrong, Eleanor, about your choices, about what success looks like, about you. Why couldn't you see me, I asked, the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud, naked and raw. Why wasn't who I actually am ever enough for you? My father looked away, unable to hold my gaze. He cleared his throat. We thought we were protecting you, pushing you toward a path with security and status. We couldn't imagine success outside the boundaries we understood, the ones we followed ourselves. That's explanation, not excuse, my mother added quietly, her grip on my hand tightening. We should have supported your vision, Eleanor, even if we didn't share it. We should have trusted you to find your way, to be yourself. The conversation wasn't a magic cure for years of dismissal, for decades of emotional distance. There were difficult moments, old patterns threatening to resurface, old hurts resurfacing. But it was a beginning, a first tentative step toward a new kind of relationship, based on who we actually were, rather than who we were expected to be. As the family departed on Monday morning, there were awkward hugs, promises to stay in touch, invitations to visit. I accepted them cautiously, neither expecting too much nor closing the door on possibility. Real healing, real rebuilding would take time, if it came at all. In the weeks that followed, I consciously expanded my circle of trust beyond Maria, Isabella, and Marcus. I reconnected with colleagues I'd kept at arm's length, allowing myself to be known more fully. I started dating again without hiding my success or downplaying my accomplishments. No longer worried about making others uncomfortable with my ambition, I stopped compartmentalizing my life into before family and after family. The separation, the constant vigilance, was exhausting. 3 months after the reunion, I invited Maria and several close friends, people who had seen me clearly when my family couldn't, to the Aura, our first San Francisco hotel, for a private dinner. These were the people who had stood by me: my UCLA roommate who'd loaned me textbook money when I was broke, the chef who'd believed in my vision for our first restaurant, colleagues who'd become chosen family over the years. To seeing people as they are, not as we need them to be, I toasted. Raising my glass, a deep sense of peace settling over me. My relationship with my birth family remains a work in progress. Some bonds have strengthened, particularly with my siblings, as they've begun to genuinely question the rigid values that shaped us all. Others, like with Aunt Bethany, may never truly heal. She sent a formal apology note 3 weeks after the reunion, but its carefully worded phrasing suggested her PR consultant had a heavier hand in its composition than her heart did. The most profound change hasn't been in my family relationships, though. It's been in myself. For years, I measured my success against their rejection, building an empire partly to prove them wrong. Every milestone was shadowed by their imagined dismissal, every achievement tinged with the question, is this enough yet? Would they see me now? True freedom came when I finally understood that success isn't about proving your worth to people who couldn't see it in the first place. Success is about building a life that feels meaningful on your own terms. It's about surrounding yourself with people who value you for exactly who you are. And it's about extending that same gift of authentic connection and worth to others, to your guests, to your employees, to every human you encounter. The Aura Hospitality Group continues to thrive, expanding thoughtfully rather than rapidly. Our focus remains creating spaces where guests and employees feel genuinely valued, truly seen. I've become more public in my role, giving occasional interviews and accepting industry recognition, no longer hiding in the shadows of my own creation. My parents visited the Aura last month. It was awkward at times, old patterns threatening to resurface, but I watched my father notice the way staff greeted guests by name, saw my mother appreciate the thought behind every design element, every curated piece of art. For perhaps the first time, they were seeing my work through new eyes, understanding that hospitality isn't servitude, but rather an art form of profound human connection. I understand now, my father said quietly, as we toured the rooftop garden I'd designed. Why you chose this path. It suits who you've always been, Eleanor. Even as a child, you always saw people, noticed what would make them feel special. It wasn't everything, it wasn't a complete reckoning with the past, or a guarantee for the future, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that's enough. So I want to ask you, have you ever had to redefine success on your own terms? Have family members or friends failed to see your true potential? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest success isn't what you build. It's learning to value yourself when others don't. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, the only failure is letting other people define your worth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to build your own definition of success.